Can Windows 11 run on 1 gigabytes of RAM? The answer is yes, and also no at the same time. Because let's be honest, 1 gigabytes of RAM now these days on a modern operating system is not enough. At least something like Windows 11 or even Windows 10. So why am I making this video? The reason is a little bit different actually. It's about the RAM, okay, that's for sure. So as you guys know, or maybe you don't know, Windows is known for using a lot of RAM. And on top of that, more RAM you have, Windows is gonna actually use more RAM by default, or you can say it will allocate more RAM for the system. So let me actually try to explain how and why Windows uses more RAM. So let's start this with as we test the Windows 11 on 1 gigabytes of RAM. So that you can see here in this virtual machine, I have only 1 gigabyte and this is the Windows 11. And yeah, okay, if we open Task Manager, this is fairly fresh Windows 11. I haven't done any optimization or debloating. So here is the Task Manager, and here you can see even with the 1 gigabytes of RAM in total, it's using almost 90% of the memory. And in Task Manager, if we try to find out what is using the most memory, we can't really see what's using the all of the RAM, because in Task Manager we can see Task Manager itself is actually using the most RAM here, which is 20 megabyte. And if we combine all these processes memory usage, still it's not going to be equal to the memory the system is actually using. So if we go into the performance and go to memory here, we can get a little bit more information about the system memory. And you can see here in use 930 megabytes available, only around 90 megabytes. And here is a little bit confusing part. So here we can see committed. This committed thingy is actually a combination of both physical memory and virtual memory in your system. So as you guys know, this has only 1 gigabytes of RAM. Rest is a virtual memory, and the system is already committing a 2.5 gigabyte. This is not a total usage, how much system is actually using. This is like system has committed, give this much memory to all the processes or certain processes. In simple words, system is like promising all these processes running in the background that I can provide this much memory. Task Manager kind of sucks if you want to get deeper information about your system info. So in that case, I'm going to use a third-party application called TMX. I have also made a video in this. This is like superior task manager than the Windows Task Manager, if you want to get more details about your system and resource usage. So this is the TMX, also known as Task Manager Deluxe. Okay, here it looks like a task manager, but it is actually better and it gives more information about the system. I don't know if I can even compare this with the task manager. Can we run these two at the same time on 1 gigabyte? The answer is still yes. And we still have 10% memory left to use. You know, Task Manager is one of the heaviest applications running right now. Here you can see at the top, the most memory that is using is actually the Task Manager, and we still have kind of 10% of memory usage left that we can use. Windows actually optimizes itself based on how much RAM you have. Okay, again, as I said, Windows is known for using more RAM, because more RAM you have, it's gonna allocate more RAM to the system, which actually leads to better performance and all that. You know, more RAM you have, your system will feel faster, basically, because it preloads all the things that you use. And Windows also analyzes your usage, like what programs you use, what services you use. Whenever you run any program, some services will like run in background to support that program and all that. So to make system more responsive, Windows actually preloads most used applications or drivers or services onto the RAM. So if you have a more RAM, your system will feel more responsive and everything will open much quicker. So here is an example. Actually, I'm gonna open the Microsoft Edge, and you can see we still have 8 to 9% free memory on 1 GB system. I have clicked on the Microsoft Edge, and you can see how slow that opens, because system doesn't have enough memory to speed up the processes that you're trying to run or application that you're trying to run. And if we look at the task manager, you can see we still have 4 to 5% free CPU usage left that we can still use. Windows basically automatically manages the RAM and background processes based on how much memory you have. Again, I think I'm just repeating at this point now, but you get the idea. Now, if I try to open, let's say, Google Chrome on my system, it will open instantly because my system actually has 32 GB of RAM, and I'm pretty sure Windows has preloaded my most used applications or drivers to the RAM. So Windows, again, as I said, analyzes your usage too, like most used apps and all that. And I'll try to explain this even deeper. Okay, so now let's close these out. Here, compared to Task Manager, this TMX, Task Manager Deluxe, provides more information. And here at the top, you can also see the background process that is using the maximum RAM on your system. So here it is called MSMPENG. It's using around 300 megabytes of RAM. So let's double click on it to get more information. So this is actually a Windows Defender related process, and I have to open the Task Manager again and again. You can't see this process in the Task Manager actually. Okay, so there are lots of background services that are actually hidden to the user. You can't really see them. So I'm pretty sure there are more services like this which are using more RAM in the background. Okay, and this is just processes running in the background. If we go into the services also allocate RAM for their use too. So now here you can see Windows Defender is actually using the most RAM, this much RAM here. And there are other system applications that are using a lot of RAM. So you can see this application information, this is using 71, other one IP helper 71. Now if we sum this, we can actually get the equal amount of RAM that is being on the system. So services also use RAM. I want to go into the performance section. Here you'll get more information about the system. We have hardware reserved only 1 megabyte. 1 megabyte hardware reserve is actually very low. Okay, it should be around a couple hundred megabytes. Let me actually show you guys on my main system. Yeah, it's not that much, but it's 130 megabytes. So here we can actually see detailed information about how your RAM is being used. We have hardware reserved, we have in use. So you can see 930 megabytes is being used, and there is almost 90 megabytes of RAM that is standby for a use. And we have 1 or 2 megabytes free memory left, even on 1 gigabytes of system. And you know what is the funny part? System is actually using more RAM than the physical RAM. It's also using the virtual memory. And here at the bottom, you can see there is process private bytes sum. This is a total sum of used memory, including the physical memory and the virtual memory. So system is actually using more RAM than what we actually have. Now, to make this a little bit interesting, we're going to increase the RAM by 1 gigabyte. And then we're going to go 4, then 8, okay? And we'll see how Windows actually handles the memory. 2 gigabytes should make Windows usable actually. Now we have 2 gigabytes of RAM, and this time system is actually more responsive than the last time. Okay, let's open the Task Manager. Okay, and here, even with the 2 gigabyte, Windows is actually using, let's just say it is still trying to optimize itself. Now we have 70, almost 75% memory usage, which means we have almost 30% of memory left. Here, we're gonna go to performance directly. Here we can see hardware reserved is still 1 megabyte. Maybe it's not going to increase that much because this is a virtual machine. 1.5 or 1.4 gigabytes of RAM usage in total. Okay, standby 400 megabytes and free 0.2 megabyte. Sometimes it increases and decreases. Standby and free are actually not in use. They are just ready to be used. So here we can actually see this time the process private bytes sum is actually 1.5 gigabyte. This is including the virtual memory and the physical memory. This time it looks like it's actually stable. It's not more than what we had last time. Last time on 1 gigabyte, it was still using almost the same amount. But this time, I think if I try to open the Microsoft Edge, yeah, this opens. Look at that. It's much faster, basically. Okay, even on 2 gigabyte. And based on your usage, you can see the standby memory and total usage actually increases and decreases. It looks like Windows 11 is actually usable on 2 gigabyte if you want to. Like, you won't be able to use heavy applications, that's for sure. Like 2 gigabyte is still not enough, but it is usable for browsing and stuff. Everything will open much faster until it runs out of the memory. Of course, we know that, right? So technically, in my opinion, Windows 11 is usable on 2 gigabytes of RAM. If you optimize your Windows 11 settings and do some debloating, it will run even better. You only need more RAM if you want to run heavy tasks or you want to run more programs at the same time. That's a common thing, you know that, right? The experience is a little bit better on 2 gigabyte actually. Yeah, it's a lot better. Look at the Microsoft Edge. It opens quickly. Okay, so now I want to increase it to 4 gigabyte actually. I'm pretty sure in 4 gigabyte Windows 11 will be usable. And I want to show you guys my main system and its memory usage. It's kind of shocking, okay? So let's increase it to 4 gigabyte. And now Windows will run really smooth for daily tasks. Now you can see it's using around 50 to 60% of the memory, which means we have half of the memory left for use. So let's actually run the TMX. Now let's just go to performance. Here you can see we have 4 gigabytes of RAM in total. And here you can actually see the RAM usage has also increased to 2.5 gigabyte. That is because, again, as I said, more RAM you have, more the system will use to make system more responsive. It will preload most used or most useful background processes and services to the RAM. And this time if we open Microsoft Edge, it's like fast. Yeah, it's obviously faster than the 2 and 1 gigabyte. So right now system is committed to 2.19 gigabytes of memory, including the virtual memory. Yeah, it's kind of confusing. Okay, again, as I said, more RAM you have, the more Windows will preserve to make Windows more responsive, basically. And it will analyze your usage, and based on that, it will allocate even more RAM for the other processes. And there are many other things that Windows does, like Windows Prefetch also uses RAM. It loads some things to the RAM which is not visible on Task Manager. GPU also preserves some amount of RAM. If you have an iGPU also preserves some amount of RAM. So there are many things that goes in the background, and we can't really, at least as a normal user, we can't really see all the processes or all the services that are using the RAM. Yeah, 4 gigabyte and even the 2 gigabyte is actually usable in Windows 11. Again, if you do some tinkering with your system, like optimize the settings and debloat your system, you might be able to decrease the memory usage. Okay, not that much, but maybe a couple percent, like 10-20%. Now let me show you guys my main system. Let's just take a look at the uh, RAM here. So in total, I have 32 gigabytes of RAM, and we have hardware reserved 134, not that much. Okay, we have available RAM that is free to use 26 gigabyte, and cached RAM is 2 gigabyte. Again, as I said, there are many services and things that uses RAM. Cache is also one of those things. And here, this is interesting. Process private bytes sum is 5.6 gigabyte, which is a lot. And I'm using the OBS Studio to record this, so OBS Studio is also using 2 gigabyte. There are some services that we can't really see. I can't see that service here. So this is Windows Defender, but there is this thing called DWM. Sometimes it's visible, sometimes it's not visible. You might see this in the TMX, DWM using the most RAM. It uses around 400 to 500 megabytes. This is a Windows core process which is responsible for graphical user interface, all the things that happens, like all the things you see, visual effects, transparency, animation, and all that. And depending on how many devices you have, like you have multiple monitors, yes, it will use more RAM on your system. If you have a higher resolution monitor, yeah, it's going to use even more RAM on your system, which might not be visible through the task manager, but it will be using. So you can see this DWMEXE is not visible right now here. Sometimes it's visible, sometimes it's not. Maybe I can search DWM. Even with the search, I can't find it, but it's running here and it's not visible. I'm pretty sure it's using more RAM than the Windows Defender. So if you think that you're gonna optimize your Windows and you're gonna get rid of some of the background processes by disabling it or something, you're not gonna make Windows use less RAM. No matter what, Windows will actually use more RAM depending on, you know, how many apps you have, or track how you use your system and what apps you use. Based on that, it will preload your things that you use onto the RAM. So technically, yes, you can use Windows 11 even on 1 gigabyte, but there are way too many services, you know, way too heavy visuals and animations, effects, and all that. 1 gigabyte is not enough for any modern system, even for some Linux system. I'm not talking about the Linux system that is like lightweight and meant to be used on like really low spec PC. I'm talking about something like Ubuntu. Even for those, 1 gigabyte is not enough. For Windows 11, definitely not. Okay, it's usable. It's going to be really slow. You'll have to wait a couple of seconds, minutes, depending on what program you're opening. But yeah, it's not usable. 2 gigabyte, yes. If you just want to browse the internet, yeah, 2 gigabyte is actually usable. And if you do optimizations and all that, maybe, yeah, it's gonna get a little bit better because there will be less services running in the background and all that, depending on what you disable and uninstall from the system. If you have 4 gigabyte, yeah, it becomes even better. Maybe you can even run programs like Photoshop, Krita, GIMP, even some video editing softwares. If you have 8, yeah, then it becomes not the perfect, but let's just say you will be able to enjoy some games too. So yeah, for 32 gigabytes of system, it uses around 6 to 7 gigabyte. Actually, I'm using some programs right now, Chrome, OBS Studio. So let's just say around 5 gigabyte for 32 gigabyte system. If you have 64, it might become 10 to 12 gigabyte. And again, there are other things that also use your memory. It's not only Windows. Your GPU also uses some amount of memory. Your iGPU also uses some amount of memory. And yeah, that's it with this one. Hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something about the RAM usage in Windows. I don't know. I tried my best to explain it. I'm pretty sure there are many other things happening in Windows. All you need to know here is that, again, I'm just repeating myself again and again. More RAM you have, the more Windows will use, for only one reason: to make system more responsive. That's it. Okay, that's all you need to know. So even if you have a 8 gigabytes of RAM on your system, yeah, Windows will still run fine. It will automatically adjust the RAM usage. And if you have 16, yeah, it will still run fine. It will increase the RAM usage by a little bit more, but it will be more responsive basically. So it is what it is. Again, as I said, yeah, Windows 11 is actually usable on 2 gigabyte. Okay, if you want to browse the internet and do some simple stuffs, yeah, it's definitely usable. For the 1 gigabyte, it's kind of not usable. It's gonna be really slow. I mean, 1 or 2 gigabytes of RAM these days isn't enough. We all know that. So above 4 gigabyte, yeah, you can use Windows 11 on. That's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. But if you still have any questions or have any suggestions for me, you can always do the comment and we can have some chit chat in the comment section too. And if you're expert about the Windows memory usage, yeah, please throw your wisdom in the comments. Thank you. That's it. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself and have fun. Bye-bye.